The fact is that what was happening with Charlie Kirk, and it's very well documented, is that he was changing his mind in a fundamental way on Israel and Israel's role inside of the United States. So both the lobby or Israel's supporters in the United States and Netanyahu are scrambling to avoid blame for this event.
John Mearsheimer just exposed Charlie Kirk's unmistakable turn against Israel in his final days. And in this clip, he talks about what Netanyahu's response to this tells us about his reputation and what this means for U.S.-Israeli relations going forward. So let's get his take on this. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
Why would Netanyahu go on international television before Charlie Kirk's killer had even been caught and deny that the Israelis had anything to do with his death? Is their reputation that bad?
Well, actually,
that he had to do that?
The answer is yes, but I would note to you that Max Blumenthal, who has done yeoman-like work breaking that story, actually put out a tweet today that showed that Netanyahu has just issued another statement where he talks about the fact that Israel and Charlie Kirk were the best of friends, and that Israel had absolutely nothing to do with Charlie Kirk's death. Now, the question you ask is, why is this the case? And the answer is, there are three big events in recent American history where people believe there was a conspiracy involved, and that conspiracy involved Israel. One is the assassination of JFK. Two is what happened at 9/11 or on 9/11. And three is the Charlie Kirk killing. This is a huge problem for the Israelis. I'm not saying that the Israelis were involved in any three of those events, but there are a lot of people who believe that the Israelis were involved in Kennedy's assassination, what happened on 9/11. And by the way, I would note that Tucker Carlson is doing a 5-part series. It's due to come out reasonably soon on what happened on 9/11, and he will make the argument that the Israelis were involved. And then, of course, there's the Charlie Kirk business, and all sorts of people think, and this is in keeping with Max Blumenthal's superb reporting, that the Israelis were involved in what happened to Charlie Kirk.
Okay, so a few things here. Number one, he's absolutely right about Israel's reputation for assassinations, and in particular political assassinations. Just look at the Wikipedia site on this. It became a meme recently when they had to break this down by decade because it involves so many names. Look at this. This is so ridiculous. This is Israeli assassinations that are documented on Wikipedia. And then the last one's, of course, the assassinations in Doha. So that's true. As far as the things that Mearsheimer talked about regarding Kennedy, a lot of people say this is just conspiracies, but it's not without base. With Kennedy, he tried to stop Israel from acquiring a nuclear weapon from the United States, essentially stealing it in what's known as the Dimona Project in the 1960s. We have communications between him and David Ben-Gurion, substantiating the claims he tried to stop that just months before his death. And he also tried to get the American Zionist Council to register as a foreign lobby. This was the precursor to AIPAC. It's what AIPAC was called before that, so that explains that. With 9/11, it's the Dancing Israelis. If you don't know about this story, there was a group of Israelis that at least some of them belonged to Israeli intelligence under the guise of being in a moving company, filming the attacks as they took place, putting up their lighters and kind of celebrating it. And they were held for a time and then, just released. And this was swept under the rug. The mainstream media said everything was a conspiracy theory. And then you have Charlie Kirk. The one thing I want to correct him on, though, is with the Charlie Kirk thing here, he had said that that Max Blumenthal argued Israeli involvement in Kirk's murder, but he doesn't actually do that. He does talks about the pressures that Charlie Kirk was feeling and the fact that he was frightened of Netanyahu, the fact that he came to believe Netanyahu was a bully, and that his high-profile, high-rank, high-money donors were trying to pressure him to get right back on board and essentially become Ben Shapiro again on Israel. But he does write that there's no evidence of an Israeli government role in Kirk's assassination. Just wanted to state that for the record. Let's continue.
What's happening here is Netanyahu is scrambling, and he's scrambling to go to great lengths to distance Israel from what happened on with regard to Charlie Kirk. And by the way, Bill Ackman, who is a mainstream supporter of Israel and was putting pressure on Charlie Kirk as well, has gone to great lengths to put out a tweet that says he had nothing but the highest respect for Charlie Kirk and had a very positive meeting with him and so forth and so on. So both the lobby or Israel's supporters in the United States and Netanyahu are scrambling to avoid blame for this event.
Yeah, no doubt. Netanyahu came out right after the fact and said this and then doubled down in another video today, responding twice to this. You know, it's because people are pointing fingers at Israel, and obviously so after these pieces at the very least raise eyebrows and things that Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson have said about this, and the fact that Charlie Kirk was feeling pressured. He was on the Megyn Kelly show about a month ago talking about the pressure he was feeling and the frustration of having his character called into question over this. So yeah, Mearsheimer's exactly right. And who did Netanyahu blame for this murder right away, like he always does? Radical Islamists. Right after this happened, before there was a suspect, before any suspect was apprehended or indicted, he blamed radical Islamists. If you don't believe me, take a look at that Greta Van Susteren interview, and then there was another one on Fox News he did where he reiterated this. Absurd.
Max Blumenthal did a rather extraordinary piece here on this show right after having spent a few hours on the phone with sources whom he described as a person who was at the meeting with Ackman and Charlie, and a person in the White House. And Max has come to the conclusion that Ackman's people offered Charlie a tremendous amount of money. It's been reported not by Max but by others to be upwards of $150 million. If he would begin to say things favorable about Netanyahu, and Charlie refused. That's when Ackman and company invited him to Ackman's home on Long Island, and they began some sort of coercive pressure on him, and he refused that.
Yeah, I mean, they viewed this as if he was an alcoholic or something. This was a Zionist intervention, toe the line or else. And Bill Ackman wrote, indeed, a long essay about this on Twitter, about how he had nothing to do with it and all sorts of other stuff. It was, I think, about 1,000 words. So he's absolutely right about that.
And he told friends in the weeks and days before he was murdered that he was afraid for his life. And he told friends and colleagues that he didn't trust Netanyahu. But here is Netanyahu saying what you just said. Now, there's a lot in here to unpack. It's not that long. It's only about a minute long. But he does say, you'll hear this, he, meaning Kirk, encouraged me to make the case directly to the American people about how vital Israel is to the U.S. national security. Hold your fire. Here's Netanyahu yesterday.
As if he had to recommend that to Netanyahu, by the way.
Joseph Goebbels, the Nazi propaganda minister, said that the bigger the lie, the faster it will spread. Well, somebody has fabricated a monstrous big lie that Israel had something to do with Charlie Kirk's horrific murder. This is insane. It is false. It is outrageous. Charlie Kirk was a giant, a once-in-a-century talent who defended freedom, defended America, defended our common Judeo-Christian civilization. Charlie loved Israel. He loved the Jewish people. He told me so in a letter that he sent me just a few months ago. One of my greatest joys as a Christian, he said, is advocating for Israel and forming alliances with Jews to protect Judeo-Christian civilization. He encouraged me to make the case directly to the American people about how vital Israel is to U.S. national security. He told me, the Holy Land is so important to my life, it pains me to see support for Israel slip away. Now, if Charlie disagreed with a policy of mine or a decision here and there, not only did I not mind, I welcomed it. This is the essence of Charlie. This is the essence of a free country. It's exactly what Charlie stood for. And I knew that his suggestions always came from the heart, from his love for Israel and from his love for the Jewish people. A few weeks before his death, I spoke to Charlie. I invited him to visit Israel again. And sadly, that won't happen. Now some are peddling these disgusting rumors, perhaps out of obsession, perhaps with Qatari funding. What I do know is this: Charlie Kirk was a great man, and a great man deserves honor, not lies. Rest in peace, Charlie Kirk.
It's always Qatari funding, right? Qatar and Russia has more influence in the U.S. government, if you trust the mainstream media, and Bibi Netanyahu, than if you actually look with your own two eyes and actually use reason and deductive logic. But there's a lot of things that he omitted there. It is true that he invited Charlie to go to Israel. He said, unfortunately, that won't happen. But what he's leaving out is, apparently, according to this article, this unnamed source that Max Blumenthal covered, it was because he turned the trip down, not because, just timing called for it. Also, what's known from this piece is that this unnamed source close to Charlie Kirk, which corroborates a lot of the things that Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson are saying about him, is that he viewed Netanyahu as a bully. He didn't like him. He was manipulative, and he hated the fact that Netanyahu was essentially dictating the president's personnel decisions in his cabinet. And that is true, by the way, surrounding yourself with people like Keith Kellogg and Marco Rubio and Mike Huckabee, and for a while, Mike Waltz and Kash Patel, the most hardcore Zionists imaginable in this administration. That is true. I mean, say a lot what you can about Charlie Kirk. He was very pro-Israel, generally speaking. And if you, take some selected bits, it does raise eyebrows. There is something here. This is a story. But he wasn't Ben Shapiro on Israel. He wasn't Mark Levin on Israel. He was kind of in between the Dave Smith and Ben Shapiro on Israel.
Well, he references a letter that Kirk sent to him. Of course, he won't read the second part of the letter in which Kirk denounced what was happening in Gaza. But this sentence, he encouraged me to make the case directly to the American people about how vital Israel is to U.S. national security. Israel isn't vital to the U.S. national security. It's destructive of U.S. national security. Is that not so?
Well, it's more than destructive of American national security. It's reaching the point where it's destructive of American liberal democracy as well. But let's leave that aside for a second. The fact is that what was happening with Charlie Kirk, and it's very well documented, is that he was changing his mind in a fundamental way on Israel and Israel's role inside of the United States. A lot of people in recent years have begun to rethink how they view Israel and Israel's relationship with the United States. And what happened with Kirk is that he was, at one point, as Prime Minister Netanyahu describes, super supportive of Israel. But he began to change his mind. And Max Blumenthal lays the story out again very clearly in his interview with you. And for anybody who hasn't seen that, they should watch it. And by the way, Tucker Carlson has put out a video where he talks about his lengthy discussions with Charlie Kirk that basically tell the same story that Max tells. So it's quite clear that what was going on here is that Kirk had flipped on Israel and on Israel's relationship with the United States.
So he did to some extent. He was frustrated about Israeli influence in the United States, but if you listen to some of those clips in isolation, you would think that he did totally turn. But I want to be clear here for clarification. Don't take my word for it. View that entire interview with Megyn Kelly about a month ago. I think it was on August 6th on Megyn Kelly's show. They do, offer a lot of Hasbara Zionist propaganda in that same show, along with Kirk's frustrations with the pushback he was getting from his donors and people calling him into question. They talk about how, it's not a genocide and all this nonsense about how you can't trust the pictures coming out of Gaza because, the Gazans are propagandists. Hamas would want nothing more to show that kids are starving, and they want to do that. So we shouldn't trust that kids are starving. Both of them align on certain things, but truly Charlie did wrestle with this issue to some extent. That's very true. And again, in Max's piece, he says, he was frightened by the backlash he was starting to get from some of his donors. He had Tucker Carlson come to a recent event of his and speak. And famously, Tucker Carlson not only strongly suggested that it was probably Israel that Jeffrey Epstein was working for. He not even strongly suggest, he said that. And he also said it's not anti-Semitic to criticize Israel, and you should criticize Israel if there is a critique toward Israel, given that the U.S. is bankrolling that country. And both of those things are not what Zionist donors, especially rich ones, want to hear. Also, he had Dave Smith debate Josh Hammer at that event, and Dave Smith got more of a positive reception than Zionist Josh Hammer at a young conservative event. Really tells you where the barometer of young conservatives is shifting when it comes to Israel.
So in a very important way, what's going on here is that Netanyahu is not telling the truth.
What else is new?
Yeah, that's right. But the problem is, there are two problems here. First of all, everybody, not everybody, but almost everybody believes that Netanyahu lies all the time. That's true in Israel as well as in the United States. So when he says he's telling the truth and others are lying, it's not an argument that's going to sell very well.
Yeah, it's funny when he cites Goebbels about the power of lies and big lies being easier to spread. Well, he's the mass purveyor of lies when it comes to foreign policy, the U.S.-Israeli relationship, even using propaganda in that speech to say, the Judeo-Christian tradition, as if that's something that we're just innately bound into. Well, he uses that language on purpose to suggest that it's just obligatory for the two powers to be aligned in everything, no matter what. No matter how many wars Israel drags us into, no matter, killing 34 sailors in 1967 on the U.S. Liberty, stealing nuclear weapons, drawing the U.S. into a war versus Iran, bombing Qatar, ostensibly a U.S. ally, and then just the U.S. looking the other way, all of this nonsense.
The other problem that he faces, and the Israelis face more generally, is they run around the world assassinating people on a daily basis. It's really quite stunning. So when someone like Charlie Kirk gets assassinated or someone like JFK gets assassinated, it doesn't take much for people with creative minds to link Israel to those assassinations. Now, I'm not saying for 1 second that that's true, but in a world like the one that we live in, where it's very hard to tell what the truth is, and most people think the government, and we're talking about the American government, lies to us, it's very easy for conspiracy theories to fester. And again, as I said, when you think about assassinations, the first country that comes to mind is Israel. And that's the problem that Netanyahu faces here.
There is. There's obvious reasons for that. We delved into the list of assassinations Israel has done, but that's the reputation they've gained, such as why Netanyahu felt forced to respond to that not only once right after it happened, but twice and again today. So that's where we're at here.
Here's Charlie Kirk, 24 hours after the meeting with Bill Ackman, with my friend and former colleague, Megyn Kelly. Chris, cut number 12.
Megyn, you're hitting on something very potent and important. The people that are attacking me are in a hyper-paranoid state because they're at war, and war tends to make things black and white, and you're a hammer looking for a nail. I have less ability sometimes online to criticize the Israeli government without backlash than actual Israelis do. Personality types like you, myself, and Tucker, the more that you guys privately and publicly call our character into question, when the hostile reaction is that now Megyn and Charlie are enemies,
right?
Boy, I'll tell you, like you're not gonna, I wouldn't say lose, but you will weaken and just basically deflate two of your strongest advocates if that continues.
He's obviously talking about the people he had spent the day before with at Mr. Ackman's home in Long Island, New York.
Indeed, man, that interview, you can tell his frustrations just leaping out of the screen. That's the way I've described it in several other videos, and we've discussed this in other videos, and I've talked about it at length. You know, in isolation, man, that looks rough. That looks to confirm everything out of Max's article, what Tucker Carlson's saying, what Candace Owens saying, what Harrison Smith's source says. Harrison Smith talked to another unnamed friend of Charlie Kirk who said that Charlie Kirk was afraid that Israel would kill him. He posted this back in August, by the way, before Kirk was shot. So a lot of things are aligning to at least raise eyebrows. And whether or not you think Israel has culpability here, it seems like Kirk was shifting in some ways on Israel. Now, again, I don't think that's on all ways. You know, and some of the other clips I think are total nothing burgers. And a lot of Charlie's position might be explained by things other than his own, you know, penchants, his own proclivities toward Israel. And the reason I say that is he was uniquely positioned in the conservative movement. He wasn't like Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens in a way. He kind of had to thread the needle between two different distinct forces within his organization. Number one, the wealthy Zionist donors, the Bill Ackmans and the Seth Dillons in the world that only want you to toe the line on Israel. They want you to be Ben Shapiro. They need you to be Ben Shapiro. And that's it. No deviations. And then you had Charlie working with this young activist base on college campuses. And we know that young people, even conservative young people, are not nearly even close as pro-Israel as their parents, as their boomer Fox News watching parents. And that's a generality. I know that there are boomers that despise the U.S.-Israeli relationship, but they're fewer and far between. That's just a fact, and every poll confirms that. So he was kind of in a rock and a hard place. And, you know, part of his opinions, especially when it comes to lately and the number of corpses pile up in Gaza over this genocide that the U.S. funds, you know that his ideas are shifting based upon some of the things he said. And again, another, you know, reference point, on July 29th, he posted a really hardcore Zionist propaganda video where he denied that any starvation was happening in Gaza as a deliberate campaign by the government. He said, there's not starvation. This is just Hamas propaganda. He recorded a long video to that extent on X. You can still see that on his timeline today. So he was still doubling down on some of the propaganda, but behind the scenes and in terms of the frustrations he was feeling toward the end, there did seem to be some shifting. So that's where we're at. And it's only natural that people will point fingers at Israel. I have no reason to have a narrative, you know, have a thread, a through line that proves Israeli involvement whatsoever. But this is a story regardless of how you feel. I keep saying that because I don't necessarily think that all the theories are great without some linkage. We need some linkage, like the fact that, you know, the FBI wiretap Martin Luther King. They tried to convince him to commit suicide, and that's why his family believed the FBI was involved. I think we need something solid to go, but this is enough to be a story to raise eyebrows, to talk about. I wouldn't shut down conversation in that direction whatsoever. Glad to hear Mearsheimer weigh in on this. We largely agree on our perceptions here. I think he buys into that Charlie shifted a little bit more than I do. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Please let me know, did Israel have any involvement in his murder? Is it just natural based on the course of history that people would have suspicions about Israel? And what does this mean for U.S.-Israeli relations going forward? Will this turn more people away from Israel if more people learn about this? Let me know in the comments. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel. Also subscribe to Judge Napolitano. Thank you for this interview, Judge. It was awesome. And it would mean the world to me if you decided to join as a member on Liberty Vault. If you click the join button below, you can help support this channel. And in return, I'll give you all my videos before they go live to the general public on YouTube. You'll essentially have advanced viewing of them. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.